Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Super Paranormal Chronicles. Tonight, I am talking to an icon. I have watched this gentleman on many, many shows. I'm absolutely fascinated by some of his stories. This man is Preston Dennett. He is a UFO researcher, a ghost hunter, an out-of-body explorer, the author of more than 30 books, and he's written another 100 articles on UFOs and the paranormal. Preston, welcome.
Thanks. Great to be here. I appreciate it.
Like I say, there are some people in this kind of environment that I consider icons. And because I've seen so many shows with you on, like, in my eyes, you are an icon, my friend. You really are. Like, I'm fascinated by what you have to
say. Well, thanks very much. I have been doing this for a long time, but I'm having fun. So
that's the main thing. That's the main thing. Okay, Preston, if we can start at the very beginning of how you got involved with UFOs, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting because I was not looking for this. I came into this field incredibly skeptical, a diehard skeptic. I was absolutely sure that UFOs were the products of hoaxes, hallucinations, misperceptions, mental illness. Turns out that's what our governments really want us to believe. Spent an enormous amount of time, money, and energy to put that forth, and it's not true. So I got a real wake-up call in 1986. I can pinpoint the exact date, actually, November 17. Did not believe in ghosts, life after death, none of it. And on the news came this report about a gentleman, a pilot, Captain Kenji Torochi, who had seen a UFO over Alaska. Not only him, his entire crew, he was the pilot of a Japanese commercial airliner. And it was really an incredible story. The news report was very short, very joking, tongue-in-cheek, just kind of laughed at this pilot and moved on. They did show his picture, though, and I'll never forget it. I'm thinking to myself, this pilot is crazy. I don't think he's lying. Maybe he saw a reflection off the ice cap, or I'm coming up with these ridiculous explanations in my own mind to account for what he saw, which was two massive craft, which basically followed his airplane for almost an hour, and it was on radar. This was a good case. So the news report ended, and I thought to myself, what is going on here? I bet you he's going to get fired. I was right about that. He was grounded. What was so interesting to me is it sparked a memory from my childhood. I remember when I was 13 years old. Mind you, I was pretty young in 1986, 21. So not very old at all, really. But I remember 7 years earlier or so, I was 13, maybe 14 years old. And my brother Mark, my older brother, comes running into the house. He's claiming to have seen a UFO. I remember he was so excited. And all I really remember him saying was it was very low, at about the height of a telephone pole. And I just kind of dismissed him. I'm like, no, Mark, you didn't see anything. UFOs don't exist. And we had a pretty large family. There's 6 kids in our family. And we all pretty much dismissed him. Which, looking back on it, was not fair and kind of sad. And I apologized later, but hearing this report in the news, I went back to Mark and I'm like, you think you saw a UFO? He's like, what do you mean I think I saw one? I saw one. I'm like, okay, well, tell me. And he really impressed me because now that I was willing to listen, he described this very incredible sighting that he had with 2 of his friends. He was not alone. They were in the, Reseda, which is right outside of Los Angeles in Southern California. And driving down the road when they saw this classic flying saucer. A metallic object, lights on it, a dome on top, silent, treetop level. And they chased it in their car down Reseda Boulevard for 15 minutes. And he said it was really strange because other people were looking at it. They were passing other cars, and it would stop right above the road and wait for them. And as soon as they got close, it would dart ahead. It did that, several times until it finally went off. And I'm like, wow, what? He's like, listen, if you don't believe me, talk to Phil and Greg. Those were his friends, who I knew pretty well. So I did. And they, of course, confirmed his story. And that's what opened it for me. Boy, what a shock it was when I found out that my two future sister-in-laws had both had encounters. One had a sighting, followed by a face-to-face encounter with gray ETs. Another saw humanoids when she was a little girl. Turned out I had several friends who had had encounters. One had missing time. Stupid me, I brought it up at the office where I worked. That's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, because two people I worked closely with had had encounters. And one, their daughter, had a face-to-face encounter with Greys and apparently taken on board. And the other had missing time. So I started buying all the books I could find on this subject. I found out about MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. And not only did I join MUFON, I called them up. I'm like, I want all your journals going back to when you opened, 1967 or something. I mean, I was going in for this all out. And I became a MUFON field investigator within 1 year. And for the next 10 years, I read every book I could find, attended every convention, I subscribed to every UFO group, I investigated case after case after case. I started writing articles, almost immediately started going on the radio and speaking at conventions, and going on TV actually, which really surprised me because I was a shy guy. I'm not so shy now, but I was painfully shy.
Yeah.
And then after 10 years, I wrote about 30 articles. I put up my first book in 1996, UFO Healings, about 100 cases of people who've been healed as a result of an encounter, and never looked back. A book every year or so on the average. And yeah, it took over my life. And real quick, when I found out this was real, it was not good news. I was upset. All of my family and friends were lying to me. That's how I looked at it. Our government was lying. This wasn't being taught in schools. I had to reevaluate everything I thought I knew. So it was a painful year, but now I look back on it with fondness. It was a good time.
Yeah. So it's actually quite funny that you mentioned that you were quite young in 1986. You and I, my friend, are the same age. I was working it out going, hang on a minute, I was 21 in 1986 as well.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's weird how back when we were younger, when if anybody spoke about this kind of thing, it was always poo-pooed. It was never like taken seriously. But then you move forward into this day and age, it is all taken seriously. And the amount of evidence that you see in the media, and what people have taken with their own cell phones and cameras is absolutely phenomenal. So do you think that it's more common now because we have the capabilities of having a camera immediately in our pockets, that there's more evidence coming to light? Or do you think it's always been like that?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think the fact that this subject has gone mainstream and is accepted helps tremendously. But back in the late 1980s, I kind of caught a wave there because that's when Whitley Strieber's book Communion came out. Bud Hopkins' book Intruders was doing really well. Gary Kinder had written a book about Billy Meyer. So the subject was enjoying a resurgence in popularity right when I got involved. So I think prior to this, nobody talked about it. And it's not as uncommon as you might think. I heard a quote. This shocked me. I heard a quote from J. Allen Hynek, who, as you probably know, is part of Project Blue Book, the astronomical consultant, and the father of modern ufology, he's been called. I heard a quote from him. This was right when I started researching, that 1 in 40 people have had an onboard experience. And I'm like, you got to be out of your mind. There's no way. That's far too common. That's millions of people. That would mean I know someone who's been taken on board, which of course that prompted me to ask everybody. And I found out I did. I didn't have to ask 40 people. So yeah, I think it's far more common than people think. But because people don't talk about it, they wouldn't even tell their spouse. People don't tell their friends and family. So I think the evidence was there. Was suppressed, not only by our government, but by the witnesses themselves.
Yeah, and I do think that you've still got two different portions of UFOlogy. You've got the sightings, you've got the the underwater theories, you've got all these new theories coming out right now. But if somebody mentions the fact that they've been taken on board, that is still kind of the taboo. Exactly, that's still kind of the taboo subject. But I understand you've had an experience of your own.
Yes, and it's amazing. It's such a shame because Congress is talking about UFOs and even the idea that perhaps there's been crash retrievals, but they're not bringing up any contactees. And it's funny because that's what I've really focused my research on, because I think that's the pay dirt. That's the heart of the UFO phenomena. That's where we're going to get the most information. I really wanted to see a UFO because I was, reading these books, which are so interesting. And then I'm talking to people who had these encounters, which is quite a bit more interesting than just reading a book because you're that much closer. And so I'm interviewing people who've just had an encounter. So I'm kind of circling around this UFOs, but I hadn't seen one. So I was getting frustrated. I was going out into the fields at night where activity was going on, trying to see one. And pretty early on, I started seeing unexplained lights. But having found out that I'd been lied to by our government and people I loved and trusted, I became weirdly more skeptical. I really had to question everything. So these were just unexplained lights to me, which were probably UFOs, but I couldn't go there. I really needed to see something that I could sink my teeth into. And as time progressed, I sure did. Because as you hang out with contactees and people are having these encounters, that ups your chances. And I was investigating a wave of sightings in Topanga Canyon, right outside of LA in 1992. And there was all kinds of activity going on, really the entire range from sightings to landings. People were seeing humanoids, some people were taken on board, people's cars were being chased down the road. It was crazy. And I was at my brother's house, my brother Mark, actually, as it turns out, because he was helping me through all this. Honestly, I needed someone to bounce ideas off of. And it was late July, around July 20th, thereabouts. I can't pinpoint the exact date, but it was July of 1992. Approaching midnight when I told I have to go home. I've got to work tomorrow. It was a Sunday. And I'm driving down their little street, which is a tiny little street. I'm coming around a corner, and I saw what I thought was a bird swooping down towards my car. At midnight, that makes no sense. So I'm looking up at it, and I realize, oh my gosh, it's glowing, and it's round. And it came down at an arc towards my car. So I'm thinking, well, maybe it's a firecracker, fireworks, because, it was late July. Some people still had fireworks. But then this darn thing stops right in front of my windshield, and it's an orb about the size of a golf ball or a tennis ball there in between. Stopped right in front of my face. So then you're thinking, okay, is that a reflection? Even though obviously it wasn't. So I'm going like that. This darn thing goes back and forth 2 or 3 times, stops again right in front of my face. So now I know it's intelligently controlled. And darts straight up. And, I had missing time. I forgot everything that happened. I don't remember driving home. I should have turned around and told my family I was minutes away from them. I didn't remember any of it until a few months later. I'm like, oh my gosh, this happened. And I'm sticking to this because I remember it. So that was the first one. And as the years progressed, I began having more sightings. That year was a big one. I had like 4 sightings that year, all anomalous lights. But over the years, things started ramping up. There was one time I was in my 3rd-story condo transcribing an interview from a lady who'd been taken on board and saw grays and had hybrid babies and the whole deal, which was a lot to swallow. Even this was the early 1990s again, mid 94 about. Something, oh my gosh, is this lady telling me the truth? She obviously believes it. But man, oh man, hybrid babies. This is, I don't know. And I'm transcribing the interview and it's midnight, 12:30. And I get this message. This is so weird because I've interviewed people who've had this experience. And now it's happening to me. It's like, go onto your roof. And I'm like, what? I'm ignoring it, thinking that's a crazy thought. Why am I thinking this? And it just was so persistent that before I even knew what I was doing, I ran 3 stories down to grab my eyeglasses out of the car because I use them only for driving. I'm very slightly nearsighted. So, this is a secure building. That's kind of a big deal to go 3 stories down. My unit's the farthest away from the parking lot of everybody.
Of course, yeah.
So I grab my glasses and I find myself running onto the roof. And here's another thing. You're not allowed to run on the roof. I'm a good guy. I'm a good boy. I don't go on the roof. It's against the rules. But I did because this impulse was that strong. And no sooner had I got up there when there's a little wall. I kind of braced myself against the wall and I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing? This is crazy. When a UFO appeared. And it was right across the street. There's a little parking lot, a little cement river. So it's maybe 200 feet away, 150. And it was right above the apartment building. And it was this giant fiery oval. So it had to be 10, 20 feet across. And as soon as I saw that darn thing, it hit me with a message. And it said, hi, it's us. We're Wendy's ETs. This is the lady I'm interviewing, right? That's not a real name. It's a pseudonym. They're like, hi, it's us. We're Wendy's ETs. She's telling the truth. This is for real. We'll prove it to you. Watch this. Now, that wasn't in English. It was a boom, telepathic. They pounded me with it. I got the message. And this darn thing moved back and forth in, non-conventional movements that nothing we have can do. Maybe for 20 seconds and then disappeared. So I'm like, oh my gosh. And I stood up there for a few minutes and I'm like, wow, okay. Whoa, that was amazing. And I was going to call Wendy up, but it was like 1 a.m. at this point, so I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, no.
I called her up the next day. I told her, I'm like, oh my gosh, your ETs showed up. I'm pretty sure it was them. They actually said all of this. This is the message I got. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's very cool. And I told her, I'm like, you're in telepathic contact, right? And she's like, well, yeah, I told you that. I'm like, okay, well, can you call them down? I'd like another demonstration. She's like, are you kidding? You just had one. I'm like, I know, but I wasn't ready. So she set up an appointment with them. Honest to God, she calls me back a week or 2 later and she's like, okay, they told us to go this place, this location at this time, which was right off this pretty major freeway in, Pasadena, near the La Tuna exit. I'll never forget it. So we drove up there late at night. I took my sister-in-law, my nephew, and her, and we got separated. So it's just me and her reaching the top of this little hill off the freeway. And no sooner did we got to this little plateau, and I'm surveilling the scene. I got my camera around my neck, and she grabs my shoulders and spins me around. I was like, look! She didn't need to point. This thing was as big as a house, 20 feet away from me, 30 feet away, 10 feet off the ground. This massive, sparkling, beautiful, it was exquisite sphere with all these golden lights on it. Totally silent, hovered there for maybe 10 seconds, 20, and started to move away and then zipped around. and I forgot about my camera. I couldn't take my eyes off this thing. So, more sightings like that, which finally ramped up to just recently. And this is so cool because I had been interviewing this lady by the name of Dolly Safran, who's like my favorite contactee ever because she has had more experiences really than anyone I've ever interviewed. Showed me her medical evidence, healings, implants, other stuff that I really can't talk about, but she showed me. Photographic evidence. She's got corroborating witnesses. She's got a sterling resume and an amazing story of continual, fully conscious contact. So I am in bed on my birthday in 2022 and I'm dreaming. It's just a dream. And suddenly I'm awake and my dream evaporates because I'm being pulled through my wall. It's really hard to describe, but it's like the wall just evaporated. And I'm pulled up through it, and I am flying upwards at super high speeds. And this is weird, because this is when I kind of like, gosh, I recognize this feeling. I have done this before. Because, I did have that missing time incident, and there's been a few other things. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I know what's happening here. I am being taken. This is amazing. And I'm looking around me, and it's the pitch black of space, and this went on for 30 seconds, which is a long time when you're going through something like this. And the next thing I know, I am being, I didn't see this happen, but I am suddenly lying on a table inside what has to be a craft because it was a 40-foot wide round room, which had indirect lighting and all the details I've heard about so many times. And it's so interesting because you interview all these people and you're thinking, well, what's it like? And you're visualizing it. Now I'm here and it's happening to me. I'm like, oh my gosh. And there was, little guys all around me, which I wasn't really looking at because there was this lady leaning over me who had these eyes that wrapped around her head, really thin, white, tightly curled hair. She was rail thin, wearing a spotless, almost glowing white jumpsuit with no seams, very, very white skin, tiny itty bitty nose, an itty bitty mouth. She was a hybrid, is what I'm trying to describe. And actually, really, I didn't think she was the least bit unusual, or should I say ugly? I'll just say, I thought she was beautiful. I'm like, wow, look at you. And she asked me if I was all right. And I said yes, and I tried to sit up. She's like, no, 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 no. We need to make sure you're all right. I'm like, listen, I'm fine. Because going up there was very electric. It was like, and it was, I could see how someone would get disoriented from that. But I wasn't. I'd remembered it. So I've had a lot of out-of-body experiences too. So that may have contributed to my being, ready, I guess. So I kept trying to get up, and they're like, no, no, no. Finally, I'm like, listen, I'm fine. So they're like, all right, get up. And I leapt off that table because there was this tall gray standing about 10 feet away, who it turns out is the tall gray that Dolly Safran, the lady I interviewed, meets regularly, all the time. Now I'm meeting her. So I rush up to her, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And she's the epitome of grace and beauty and elegance. She's a gray. She's got no hair, huge head, enormous eyes, tiny little mouth. She's just barely smiling, a little nose. She's wearing a white cloak. She tilts her head forward and to the side and looks at me and speaks telepathically. And she says, so, is this what you thought it would be like? And I said, no, it's much better. It was. I had no fear. I understand if people are afraid, but I've been interviewing people for a very long time and imagining something like this. So, no fear at all. It was great. And I asked her if I could explore. She said, sure.
How can you put that into conscious logic though? Yeah, sort of like you just explained to me that something that you expect to see on a TV show or on a movie. How can you get your brain around the fact that this actually happened to you and you weren't hallucinating or you weren't dreaming?
Yeah. Well, being there and as it's happening, I am in a state of absolute astonishment. I am like on cloud nine. I'm like, I cannot believe this is happening. This is so amazing. This is incredible. This is actually happening. And it wasn't a dream. That's the thing. So I was like, oh my gosh, I really want to remember everything that's happening here. So that was what's spinning through my mind. I'm not thinking, oh, could this be a dream? Because no, it wasn't. It was as real as I'm talking to you right now.
That is
Yeah, it
just
was
so
something I'd
amazing.
so wanted for so long because I'd had like missing time and I was having dreams of having been on board, which were essentially memories, which I truly believe that. Even though they were dreams, I was remembering it. I was having flashbacks, but it's a different story when you're there and you're remembering it as it happens. So
I can I can imagine. Yeah, it's sort of like that. That would pretty much blow someone's mind. I think.
I was jumping up and
Absolutely.
down. And
Yeah.
they had windows all around the craft. I saw grays on the other side of the room. I'm like, whoa, look at them.
Yeah.
Because they look
But,
different.
yeah.
They
So
weren't
how
very
long would you
close.
say? How long would you say that you were away for?
It was about 5 minutes. Very brief, which is so unfortunate because, you know, if they had said, do you want to stay? I'd be like, yeah.
Yeah. I've got this checklist of things I'd like to see and do, please. It's like, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
But, I looked out the window and I could see the earth down below. And that was thrilling. And for all you flat earthers, I could, no, it was round. I wasn't so far away that I could see the globe, but I could see the curve of the earth very pronounced. So I'm trying to figure out how high up that would be because looking at some satellite shots and stuff, I think it was around 500 miles.
Wow.
I still want to dig deeper on that.
Oh,
But
for
then the
sure.
craft dropped down to the surface of the earth in about 1 second. It was funny, there was a lady standing next to me who was fully conscious because there were some people on board who were not conscious. They were in a daze. I tried to talk to them and they wouldn't talk to me. I was going to talk to this lady because she was like, whoa, oh my God, look. She's like me. And so I walked up next to her and I looked out the window and I saw the earth. I'm like, oh my gosh. The craft drops down, it rocks slightly, and it shoots back up. Uh, I was going to talk to her, but then I turned around because the tall gray, she's motioning to me to come over to her. She gives me this glass tumbler of green liquid. Now, she exudes absolute, trust and nurturing and wisdom. I trust her. So I'm not even questioning, when she says, drink this. But I always sniff stuff before I drink it
Oh
or
yeah.
I'm a sniffer. And so I'm like, I can't smell it. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, huh, because it's thick. It's thick, almost glowing neon green. I'm like, wow. And I take a sip, and it's very thick, like cough syrup, kind of. And it does have a taste. It was not unpleasant. It was kind of kiwi, a little bit like
Okay.
a kiwi, maybe slight lime taste. And I just took a little sip, and she started to take it away from me. I'm like, wait, this is mine. You said I could have this. And she's like, huh? I'm like, well, can I take another sip? She looked at me like I was crazy. She's like, well, fine. No, okay. And I took another sip, and that's all I remember. I was back
Was
in bed.
there was there any reason of what you can think of for them giving you that drink?
Yes, I wrote an article in one of my books. Well, I wrote an article and I put a chapter in a book called Alien Drinks. So this is not an unusual experience where people are taken on board. And there's all kinds of theories. One is, oh, it's to help you forget, right? I wasn't so sure about that. Some feel it's nurturing or medicinal in some way, which I think is probably more along the lines of what's going on here. But I ended up asking Dolly about it. And she's like, oh, yeah, well, they give that to people because when you're on board a craft and you're out there in the beyond the magnetosphere, you're getting doses of gamma radiation that could be considered damaging. And that is something that helps with that. So that's
That
what it
makes
was
perfect sense. Makes
from
perfect
my
sense.
understanding.
Yeah. So I don't know how I can ask any questions that can't like after what you've just said. It's like okay, I've got no more questions. So when you're being part of MUFON and you go on an investigation, how do you verify the credibility of witnesses or what they've seen, what they've encountered?
Yeah. Well, it's a process, and I think anyone who's done investigations of any kind in any field would agree with that. And I certainly became better at it as time went on because when I became a MUFON field investigator, now they give you classes, there's a whole ordeal you go through. Back then, there was nothing like that. They just kind of threw you into the deep end. They did require you take a test, which had some 200 questions, if I recall. It was a take-home test. I thought, well, this is going to be easy. It's a take-home test. There's no internet though, so but I got the test and I'm zipping through it because it's all about what Betty and Barney Hill and Calvin Parker and Travis Walton and all the There was the UFO section. I'm like ding 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 ding, ding going down, and then there was a section on photography. I'm like, ooh, I don't know these questions. My sister was taking photography, so that helped. There was a whole section on astronomy. I was taking astronomy in college and really loved it, and I was all into science. I was really scientifically minded as a young man. I loved science. I was very rational, materialist kind of guy. So that helped. There was a section on meteorology. I was taking that in college as well, which is extraordinarily complex. You wouldn't think, but there's a lot of different types of clouds and humidity and all these things. So there was a whole science section. I did really well. I missed 2 answers. I was so mad because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, I guess. But then I got my little field investigator's card, and they started referring me cases, and it was thrilling because you get to speak to these witnesses. You have them fill out a whole form. I would always do a preliminary verbal interview, and then I would do one that's recorded. So I could. That's my first step. Is their preliminary interview matching their recorded interview? Then you ask for corroborating witnesses, like, can I talk to your spouse? Do you have anybody who can vouch for you? And you just go through the whole checklist of fact checking. You look for corroborating witnesses who saw stuff at that time, because there was a database that was starting to be put together. And the internet was just beginning to come out. At that point, it really wasn't useful. So that was difficult to do. But I had all the MUFON magazines, and I would check for anyone who saw UFOs in that area at that time, and this kind of thing. And I learned you can sort of gauge a person's emotions too. And it's funny because if someone saw a UFO, it's one thing. I interviewed anyone. If you saw an unexplained light for 3 seconds, I'm coming over. But there are people who are describing seeing humanoids, being taken on board. And almost always they would start out with a caveat saying something like, I have no history of mental illness in my family. You've got to believe me. I don't do drugs. I've got a good job. And I've got a college education. They would try to find some way in, like, please just believe me. And sometimes they would seriously weep. They would get really emotional. I remember asking one guy, can you tell me what this figure looked like? And he started crying. He's like, I'm really sorry. This is a Marine. This is a guy who's a tough guy. And he was so embarrassed. I felt so bad. I'm like, listen, if you don't want to describe it, that's fine. He's like, no, I want to. But he says, I couldn't look at it. I was too scared, so I can't give you a good description. He was describing a reptilian humanoid. So he had a really difficult encounter. But that is a big tell, I think, when someone's truly emotional. Like, okay, And there's these little details, especially back then, that were not well known. I'd call them markers or little red flags. Like, oh, like, the interior of UFO, what it looks like, the clothes they wear, the things ETs say, the tools they use, how they behave. There's all these little things that even today I still have some, which I kind of keep close to my chest because I'm like,
Yeah.
ooh, okay, I can use this. But like one guy, he's like, you're never going to believe me. Because I asked him how big was the room. And he gave me this look like, I don't know how to tell this guy this. I'm like, just, it's okay. Tell me, I've heard it all. He says, well, the room was about 20 feet across, but then I asked them where they were from. And he says the entire room expanded and grew in size, and they displayed a holographic star chart. And he could see the solar system, and way off in the distance, all these stars was this little red light blinking, and they're like, that's our star. He says the room grew in size. It changed size. I'm like, ding, 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 ding. I've heard this before. Nobody knows about this. This is amazing. He was a medic, by the way, a Navy medic. So a
Wow.
great witness. But yeah, there's all these things you go through, and you get better at it as well. Because every now and then I will get someone, I'm like, oh, I don't think so.
Yeah,
You're pulling the wool over my eyes. This story is not adding up.
that's it. And in this day and age, you've got those people out there that make things up. Now, yeah, I've been in the emergency services for 25 years, so when people are not telling you the truth, because then you get discrepancies in the story. If they repeat the story, there's something different every time. So that kind of raises a little bit of a red flag to say, hang on a minute, if you can't get your story straight, what are you hiding?
Right, exactly. And that's why I love it when I have a multiple witness case. There was one time I had 4 people who saw a UFO, and it was amazing because one guy didn't really want to talk to me. He said it happened. 2 were brothers, and one guy gave a fairly good description. One guy he's not answering my questions. I'm like, listen, what did it look like? And he's like, I was too scared. When I saw that thing over the house, it was so big that I ran and hid by the side of the house, and I wanted to crawl under the house. One guy, he loves this subject. He'd seen a UFO previously. Gabe Aldort was his name. He gave every darn detail. He described it to a T. But between all 4 of them, you could tell they were telling the truth. And there were slight discrepancies in their details. And you learn that that's actually a clue towards the veracity of their subject, of the experience. Because talk to 5 witnesses who saw a car accident. They're going to give
Exactly.
slightly different details. But yeah, if a person's story is boom, 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 too structured,
Yeah,
then I also get suspicious. So
for sure.
there's kind of a sweet spot where okay, this is,
Yeah,
and it's funny because witnesses will kind of look at you and like, how much do I trust this guy? Is he going to believe me? How much do I tell him? And only after you gain their trust do they start telling you the really juicy details. Because if they saw a humanoid, again, most people don't want to talk about it because they've been gaslit, they've been ridiculed, they've lost friendships, you know, family members over this subject.
yeah. And you mentioned humanoids and you've mentioned greys. Are there any other common descriptions that people use to describe extraterrestrials?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's really interesting to me because almost always they do describe humanoids, the humanoid form. I remember hearing that when I was a kid. I was watching In Search of or something. I'm like, this is Star Trek. This is ridiculous. I expect ETs to have tentacles or something different. But that's just not the case. This is what we're kind of stuck with. This is what people are seeing. So that is one really strong commonality, which raises huge implications because some look just like us. I mean, they look like us. So what contactees have been told is essentially we all share a common heritage, which makes sense if the Greys are interbreeding with us. So one thing people almost always describe is the eyes. They focus on the eyes of these beings, whether it's Greys or Mantids or tall whites or little blue beings or even the human-looking ones. These ETs are very intelligent. They're very telepathic. They're very advanced. And so when they look at you, they are reading you. And people often are just like their eyes, their eyes, their eyes. With grays, the descriptions vary more widely than you'd think. It's not just short little guys with gray skin and bald heads and dark eyes. The eyes can sometimes be much smaller, rounder, human looking, but generally almond shaped and quite large, and generally short. Though people will see 6 foot tall grays, they're generally 5 to 4 feet, down to 3 foot tall. So the jumpsuits that they wear, that is another very strong commonality. No seams, no buttons, no zippers, no markings, tight fitting. Some people say, well, I'm not even sure they were wearing clothes. Probably they were. Having interviewed a bunch of people, I think what people sometimes think are unclothed ETs are just ETs wearing very skin tight jumpsuits. But yeah, commonalities in the way that UFOs look, the tools, and even what they say. Almost always, without exception, when someone meets ETs for the first time face to face, they will say, have no fear. Do not be afraid. No harm will come to you. We're not here to hurt you. You're fine. Relax. These sort of things. Because apparently we are pretty scared and react.
I wonder why.
But yeah, the commonalities are amazing to me.
Yeah. So we can't discuss UFOs without talking about Roswell.
Yes.
Obviously, one of the biggest UFO stories in the world. Anybody that talks about UFOs knows about Roswell.
Yeah.
So, government cover up for sure.
100%. It did happen. I've got no doubt in my mind. I've spoken with Don Schmidt, one of the primary investigators, and I'm very, very impressed by him because he's still finding new witnesses or the children of witnesses. An amazing event. 1947, July. Apparently, there was more than one craft that went down. But what I like about Roswell is this is the case that keeps on giving. It's not a dead horse. This case is the number one. I think proves that this is real. It's not the only UFO crash by any means. It's one of probably a couple of hundred at least. But what I love about Roswell is they interviewed people who saw this thing coming down, hit the mountain, scattered. They've got witnesses who saw it on the radar scopes. They've got witnesses whose property it landed on. They've got the witnesses that they've interviewed who guarded the craft, the witnesses who picked up the wreckage, the witnesses who drove the wreckage to the base, the witnesses who saw the wreckage coming to the base, the witnesses who shipped the wreckage to, Wright-Patterson and various locations, witnesses who studied the wreckage. I mean, there are hundreds of people who have verified this story. To say it's a weather balloon is ludicrous. Jesse Marcel was the head of the intelligence outfit there at Roswell. He knows what a weather balloon is.
Yeah.
And they made him basically so sad. Because I talked to his son, Jesse Marcel Jr., right sadly before he died. And he talked about this too. That it was very, very hard on his father because he had to toe the party line. And people lost their lives over this. People were threatened. Gosh, we came so close. When that press release was, made public, we've got one. If they had not retracted that, we would be living in a different world. But that press release was retracted. The cover-up clamped down hard, and that case disappeared into obscurity for, 30 years almost? 25 years? I love the Roswell case. It's phenomenal.
Now, one thing that is quite relatable, I actually watched a very good friend of yours, Josh Gates, this morning on a TV show talking about Roswell, and they were talking about the picture of Brigadier General Roger Ramey, like holding up the weather balloon, and they were trying to break down the document that he had in his hand, and they've got some like tech guide trying to decipher some of the words. What's your impression on the document?
Yeah, how amazing is that? Because little did they know they're trying to pull the wool over our eyes, but there's a document in the picture that's visible. And through computer technology and, with some experts, they're finding out, well, no, it's mentioning a disk right there.
Yeah.
And I've talked to some people who've, really studied this in depth. Amazing. The documentation of Roswell, people have tried to follow it. Senator Stephen Schiff, I think was his name. Schiff, at any rate, of New Mexico, tried to track down what happened to all the documentation and got nowhere. And whether it's a coincidence or not, he suddenly died of a very aggressive form of cancer, which makes me wonder. But yeah, there's documentation of this. Some of it has leaked out in that way.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because somewhere out there, that wreckage is in some vault. I suspect it's not so much in a vault, but being studied very closely. And there's no doubt in my mind that this technology has been reverse engineered. Colonel Philip Corso, his book, The Day After Roswell, is pretty interesting. His resume is unimpeachable. There are those who have tried to debunk him unsuccessfully, I think, because he flat out says that this technology was farmed out to various industries in a very sneaky way so that those who got it didn't know where it came from. And we have such things as, according to Corso, like fiber optics and the integrated circuit and night vision goggles and Kevlar and a few other things that came directly from Roswell. I don't know how true that is. I traced down some of these inventions thinking, because you can go, who invented Kevlar? You can look all this stuff up.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have spoken with some whistleblowers myself, personally, who are on their, one guy was on his deathbed. I was just so profoundly touched by this guy because he had an amazing story to tell. And he really wanted to do his part for disclosure. And I think most investigators have talked to some of these whistleblower folks. There's no doubt in my mind that we have this technology and to some extent have reverse engineered it.
And like you say, the fact that not necessarily week by week, but as the years progress, we're getting more and more reliable evidence to say that this was not like a weather balloon. Yeah, there's so much
it's
out
funny.
there right now.
The Air Force is still digging in. They released, there's about 300 books on Roswell. I got about 15 of them. I'm like, I can't, I'm done. But man, oh man, more books on that case, I think, than any other.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's mountains of evidence to support it. And frankly, mountains of evidence to support the reality of the UFO subject. It's not just eyewitness testimony. And it really chaps my eye when people say, there's no evidence for ET. I'm like, what rock are you living under?
Yeah.
There's radar, there's landing traces, there's photographic evidence, film evidence. Eyewitness testimony is considered evidence in a court of law and it can put you to jail for life, just so you know.
Exactly.
But angel hair, people don't know about that. This wispy substance that comes off of UFOs, metal fragments, it goes on and on. Physiological effects, healings and injuries, animal reactions, electromagnetic effects. Documents from our own government, they take this seriously. You bet they take this seriously.
No. And it's quite funny how some people say that we're the only beings in the universe. It's like, how naive do you have to be to think that in one small ball, in one small universe, we are the only living species when you've got all these other universes and they've got millions of planets. How can you say that we are the only species that lives? Yeah, how naive do you have to be to believe that? It's crazy. There has
Yeah,
to be something. Yeah,
it's absolutely ludicrous. It's funny. Someone once put on the internet, "How come no astronomers see UFOs?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? I've got a list of 300 astronomers. Clyde Tombaugh, the discoverer of Pluto, saw one. Frank Halstead of Darling University. There's a list of them. Lincoln LaPaz, very respected astronomer. So absolutely, we have a database now worldwide of more than several million documented UFO encounters. MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and NUFARC, National UFO Reporting Center, together have some 2 to 300,000 cases. But we've got AFRO, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, CUFO, Center for UFO Studies, NICAP, the National Investigative Committee of Aerial Phenomena. This is just US, by the way, which
yeah,
is, compared to the world, just a tiny little portion of the world.
exactly.
All these
And
other countries have databases as well. The ETs have done their
exactly.
part. They
Yeah,
absolutely have disclosed.
yeah. And it's it's really interesting how when we were both kids to within the last 10 to 15 years, it was always UFOs. But in the last few years, they've kind of changed it a little bit to UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, and USOs, underwater submersible. I have to get this right. Submersible objects. So, what's your theories on USOs?
On USOs?
Yes.
Yeah, well, they're UFOs. They're the same thing. But I can understand why the terminology has to change. UFO isn't a great word, let's face it. It's become synonymous with extraterrestrial craft. I think that's what we should call them. I hate the word UAP. I don't like it. I think it's diversionary. People say, "Oh, you're a ufologist." I'm like, "Well, you can call me that. Don't call me a uapologist, because that does not work for me." USO, yeah, an unidentified submersible object, that works because you really can't call it an unidentified flying object. But essentially, these objects, the term often used is transmedium. Okay, because these objects are apparently able to travel in a vacuum of outer space, in the atmosphere, underwater, and frankly, through solid objects. There are cases of them going into the ground. They can turn dimensional, I suppose, is what's going on here. But USOs are interesting because they haven't gotten a lot of attention for a long time, and now there's this huge resurgence in interest. And it's funny because when I started investigating, I started getting a lot of cases right off the bat off the coast of Southern California. And I found out that that area is one of the biggest USO producers in the world. Probably the biggest. I'll just go there because mile for mile, it produces more than any other area. And every single investigator that was based there has cases. Yvonne Smith, Barbara Lamb, Ann Druffel, Bill Hamilton, Robert Stanley, all of them have cases. And I've ended up writing a whole book about it because it just got to be ridiculous. I've got over 150 really solid USO cases in that area. And it's so interesting because they can come barreling down into the water and not make a splash. We don't have anything that can do that, not officially. They have, there are sightings underwater of these craft darting from one side of the ocean to the other, just like people describe in the sky, 1,000 miles an hour. We know we can't do that because I've
For
talked to
sure.
submariners and people in a position to know. And no, we don't have anything that can do much more. Not even 100 knots. There's some question of whether we can go above 50 or even up to 70, but no, nothing up to as fast as these objects are going. So they clearly have some trans-dimensional capability or some kind of force field. It's super interesting because I've come to realize kind of became the go-to guy for a while there for USOs. And still get a lot of reports. Our rivers have them, tiny little ponds, lakes across the world, our oceans. There's a lot of USO activity. And it's interesting because I think there's a place they can go where we can't see them or get to them very easily. So they can, do whatever it is they're doing and not be observed or molested by government folks.
Yeah.
But yeah, gosh, I have one case off the Santa Catalina coast there of 200 objects coming out of the water.
Wow.
So there's got to be a parking lot down there of UFOs, or at one time there was. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I think I know the answer to the next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What would you like to see happen in the future regarding the investigation of UFOs?
I would like it to be government funded, honestly. I would like this to have truth and transparency. The cover up has got to end. It has to move this subject forward to where it needs to be. Will it ever end? Doubt it. I really don't think our governments, and I use that term loosely, governments, will ever be truthful or transparent with this subject because they're not now, and they have never been. I think the cover up, you can trace it to the highest levels of the military industrial complex, the intelligence agencies, really it's kind of a cabal of folks who are clamping a lid on this subject. But UFOs are real. They are here. They've been here a long time. You can't hide the truth forever. You can distort it. You can lie about it. You can cover it up. You can ignore it. But you will never destroy it. And sooner or later, it's going to come out. The government cover-up, we're seeing it collapse under the weight of its own lies right now. And they're being forced to make positive statements about this subject. Because if they don't, they will lose control of the narrative. They become irrelevant and not credible. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. Yeah. We all know our government are liars. We all know it. There's no doubt about it. And it's a big joke. It's an open conspiracy. It's ridiculous. I would love truth and transparency. I would love researchers to come together, stop infighting, stop squabbling. Let's reach a consensus of what we know. It's amazing to me because there's so much disinformation in this field. Bad actors, people who call themselves UFO researchers, and they're government agents. There's no doubt in my mind. And I'm not going to name them because some are still living and they're very active in this field, and it's infuriating. And some quote contactees who are pushing this fear-based narrative, like ETs are here to harm us. Well, hold on a second. Are you talking about the ETs that have been around since prehistory? Those guys? Those guys, every major researcher out there who focuses on onboard experiences has multiple healing cases. I've documented over 300. I put out a new book, The Healing Power of UFOs, because Barbara Lamb has cases, Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, John Mack, Tim Beckley, Timothy Good, Brad Steiger, Jacques Vallée, all of them, Edith Fiore, Ray Hernandez. I could go on and on. They all have healing cases. Don't tell me for 1 second they're here to hurt us, because when someone's taken on board, the message they get over and over again is, why are you messing around with nuclear power? What's wrong with you? You're on a pathway to self-destruction. Stop chopping down the forests. You're polluting your planet. War and aggression and greed and corruption is choking your society. Over and over again, the messages are very much trying to help us. Yes, it's scary for people. Yes, there's a lot of confusion surrounding this subject. And certainly an encounter can cause trauma for people. I'm not going to gaslight anybody. It's their encounter. I am not here to say, oh, that didn't happen to you. I understand. But no, I don't think the evidence supports them coming here to hurt people or scare them or take over in any way.
And I absolutely love that answer because it absolutely puts it into perspective for everybody. So, Preston, I hate to say this, but this is unfortunately coming to an end. I could talk to you all night, but I don't think my wife would let me. We've probably got other things to do as well. So, what's next on the agenda for Preston Dennett?
Well, I'm always working on this subject. I'm a dog with a bone. I'm not going to let it go until this subject goes mainstream and it cover up collapses. I'm going to keep at it. I'm working on another book, number 33, I think it is, a sequel to my book Symmetry about Dolly Safran. I'm working on another book about UFO encounters, and got my YouTube channel where I'm putting out information as fast as I can in a very objective, facts only, not cherry picking or shoe fitting or pushing a narrative way, just releasing the information, the facts as we know it. So yeah, I'm pretty active. I've got several irons in the fire, so to speak. I think this subject is so important. Just think, people say we have an energy crisis. Well, no, we don't really. That's manufactured. We've got people say we have an economic crisis. I'm like, well, I don't think so. Because we're funneling so much money into this. If you look into it, if you follow the money, it's crazy. An environmental crisis. Well, yeah. And the ETs have been warning us about it for a very long time, and we don't need fossil fuels. All of this could be solved. This subject is so important. We all deserve to know the truth. I'm so glad you're doing this work because every one of us plays a role. It's very important. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm very passionate about this, as you can tell.
I kind of got that just a little bit.
Okay, good.
But Preston, it's been an absolute pleasure. Like I said, I could talk to you all night. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to seeing you on your next TV show. I'm going to try to read some of your books. I know there's a lot of them, but I will try and read some. But for now, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. You have a great rest of the evening.
I sure will. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.